Good evening. Good evening. I hope that you are doing well. Ronnie, I see Ronnie is here. Thank you for joining. I was not expecting that anybody will join since it's very late at night. I will, however, post this video as soon as I'm done recording so that everybody else can at least see it. I know it's been a very long time since I did these videos, and I hope that it's going to be beneficial to you. I can see you, Mr. Ronnie. Thank you for joining. So,
Yes,
yeah, I hope you're doing well. Okay. So
yes.
tonight we're going to talk about the personal consequences of marriage. If you have any question, you can stop me and then ask that question. I will give you time and then I will answer. So,
Okay, team.
okay. So as we know that when people get married, there is always consequences, and these consequences are referred to as invariable and variable consequences of marriage. Okay. So the conclusion of a marriage has a lot of consequences. It can be personal consequences or it can be patrimonial consequences. And these consequences, they apply to all kinds of marriages, and that includes the civil union that we spoke about previously, and as well as the customary marriages, which a lot of our people usually prefer. So some of these personal consequences, they include a change of status of the parties. So by change of status is what I mean is obviously when you're not married, you are single, and then when you get married, you get the marriage status. So that is the status I'm referring to. And then another consequence is called the creation of a right of association and companionship with one spouse, also referred to as consortium omnis vitae. I will type it here. Can't even say the chat box. Okay. Okay. Chat box. It's consortium omnis vitae. We'll talk about that in a bit, what it is and what it entails. Hi, Dikeledi, welcome. So another consequence is a reciprocal duty of support. A reciprocal duty of support also comes in automatically as soon as the spouses get married. That means that immediately after you get married, you automatically have a duty of support to your other spouse. So, for example, if they need shelter, you are obligated to provide, and the other way around. And other personal consequences that a party can enforce by an action of law. So, a little bit of a brief with the with status of the spouses and the diverse personal consequences. So, like I said, on the conclusion of marriage, the parties undergo a change of status that brings about a number of consequences. I'm going to mention a few, and then the rest of them you will be able to find them on your textbook. So there is another one called a relationship of affinity. So the relationship of affinity comes into being between a spouse and the blood relations of their spouse. So this creates the new impediments of marriage. So the relationship of affinity, there's different types of them. I'm just going to explain one. and then the rest you can read by yourself. So let's say, for example, you get married today, and then that the relationship of affinity comes in a way that, okay, let's say tomorrow you decide to get divorced, and then you decide that you're going to marry your ex-mother-in-law of the person that you just divorced. So there is a relationship of affinity that marriage is going to be prohibited. So you can no longer get involved with such people like your mother-in-law, or maybe your father-in-law, if it is the other way around. That is the relationship of affinity. It goes to the grandparents and so on and so on, and it also applies to the children. And then the other consequence that falls under status would be the spouses will now then be legally prohibited from concluding a further marriage, a civil union, a customary marriage, while that particular marriage still exists. So it means that once you have concluded a marriage, then you're no longer able to conclude another institution of marriage while that particular marriage still exists. And then the last one that I'm going to touch on, like I said, the rest. Yes, go ahead, sir.
See,
Yes.
is affinity goes together with contumalia? Is there any similarities with contumalia? Because in contumalia they say it's an insult. It's like marrying your sister, your brother, like that.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more or less the same thing.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
Let's welcome Hensheri, who just came in. Okay, so the last one that I'm going to touch on, and then the rest you can go ahead and read by yourself, is the minors. When the minors conclude a marriage, they attain majority through the marriage and they acquire the full capacity to act. You will know that we have spoken a lot about minors in the past. I'm sure you already know a lot about minors right now. So when minors conclude a marriage, they attain majority through that particular marriage, and they acquire a full capacity to act. And should that marriage end of that particular minor, they would have acquired the majority status. If that marriage ends, they will still be regarded to as a majority. They cannot turn back to become a minor, even though they are still under the age of 18. So that is one of the consequences. I think that is one of the dire consequences, especially for a minor. So I will move on to the next one. There's a lot of these consequences under status. Please, you can go and read them by yourself for the sake of time. And then we now move on to the consortium omnis vitae, the one that I spoke about earlier. I did type it on the chat. It's a Latin term, I hope. So since marriage creates this special reciprocal relationship between the spouses, which are referred to as the consortium omnis vitae, I hope I'm pronouncing it well. Although it's a very difficult concept to define with a legal precision, the basic description or definition of the consortium omnis vitae is an essential characteristic of marriage. Although its contents may differ from marriage to marriage, the concept of consortium entails a community of life, and it is a question of fact whether there is indeed a consortium between the parties. So there is, I think, a clearer definition. I'm trying to find. If I find it, then I'll share it with you guys. So it says here, protection of the consortium. There is cases that are cited here. I'll share that with you on the chat on WhatsApp, so that you can be able to refer to those cases and understand this concept of consortium. So the law protects the consortium omnes vitae in various ways. The consortium is the reason for the existence of privilege relating to marital communications in civil as well as criminal proceedings. That continues even after the termination of marriage. This means that spouses may confide in each other and rely on their loyalty to another. The privilege also explains why one spouse, as a general rule, cannot be compelled to testify against each other. I think it does make sense now. But consortium omnes vitae is, under consortium omnes vitae, there is also protection against third-party interference. When I studied this, I thought this was very interesting. So they say the right to consortium also consists of mutual companionship. In the past, the law made provision for 3 actions that wronged the spouse to institute against third parties who interfered with this relationship or who caused the loss of consortium. And these included adultery, enticement, and harboring. So what used to happen in the past was that when 2 people are married, and then trying to find a perfect example. When 2 people are married, a man and a woman, and then let's say, for argument's sake, a man now cheats with somebody else. So instead of the wife dealing with the man, the wife will then now deal with the person that the man is cheating with, to say, okay, you trying to ruin my marriage, then I can sue you for that. So I think that is the perfect example. So the most common action against a third party was an action based on adultery. The premise was that where a spouse committed adultery with a third party, the latter infringed the rights of the other spouse and committed a wrongful act against such other spouse. The action for damages by the wronged spouse based on actual injuriam as the delictual claim aimed at remedying injury to personality. However, this was abolished by the Supreme Court of Appeal in the case of RH versus DE. If you want to read about it, you can check that case. Because it had become, so it was abolished because it was outdated and its continued existence was no longer justifiable. And also in the same case, the Constitutional Court dismissed an appeal against the decision of the Supreme Court, holding it that it is not reasonable to attach delictual liability to adultery through this decision. It confirmed the abolition of the action. And so therefore this action can no longer be instituted. So I think that is something that is very interesting to know, and also to use for future references. So now we move on. Any questions before I move on?
No, myself, I'm covered.
Okay, no problem. Welcome, Mandla. Thank you for joining by this time of the evening. The next one is the reciprocal spousal maintenance, reciprocal duty of support, the one that we mentioned previously. So one of the invariable consequences of marriage is that a reciprocal duty of support between the parties is created from the date of marriage, irrespective of the matrimonial property system. The spouses are legally in the same position. I did touch on this just when we started, that automatically when you get married, that reciprocal duty of support is created. And that duty of support, it goes, it extends even after the marriage has been dissolved. So the reciprocal duty of support between the spouses exists from the date of marriage, and it takes precedence over the duties of support that blood relations owe to a spouse. Consequently, married persons are not entitled to claim support from their parents or their adult children while their spouses are able to provide for them. As the duty of support is reciprocal, each spouse is obliged to contribute pro rata according to their means. So now you cannot say you are a man, you are working, and then you have a wife who is not working, and then you demand that they support you if they don't have the means. Obviously, it's not going to be possible. But if you are the one who is working and you have the means to support, then obviously you have the duty to support. And the other way around, as long as you don't have the means, you cannot. But if you have the means, then you can. It's it's probably a matter of logic to say, if you are working, obviously you are not able to support the other person, and if they are working, they're able to. And then because you're married, then there is that duty that was created by marriage. So it says here, the duty of support entails providing accommodation, clothing, food, medical, and dental services, the cost of matrimonial litigation, and whatever else required. So the social status of the spouses, their respective means and income, and their style and cost of living determines the extent of the duty of maintenance, and the maintenance obligation is enforceable in maintenance courts, the magistrate courts, such as family court and the High Court. So when we're talking about the divorce and the consequences of divorce, this is where we're going to dive deeper with regards to maintenance, as to what happens when spouses divorce, who has to support who, and what are the requirements. But this lays a foundation to say, okay, if the spouses come to a point where they be like, oh, okay, we are divorcing for whatever reason, then there are certain requirements that need to be met to be like, okay, this is the kind of lifestyle that these people were living. If, for example, they were living a very luxurious lifestyle, the court does take that into consideration. Either one party was not working or not, the court will have to look at that and say, okay, this is the kind of life that you lived, and the fact that you are divorcing, it doesn't necessarily mean that your wife now has to move from this level to the level where she cannot be able to provide for herself because now you are divorcing. So the court will obviously make an order based on that particular income to say, if you are living spending like R1 million a month, taking vacations to overseas every 3 months, that lifestyle doesn't need to change, especially for your wife who doesn't have the means of support. An order will be granted that you're going to be paying for those vacations and so on and so on. So those are the certain things that the court will take into consideration. Yeah, it's sounds bizarre, but yeah, it's true, and it's a very very interesting subject. So let's move on from there. In fact, let's get onto this a little bit parts of divorce, death, or separation on the duty of support. So since the duty to maintain each other is a consequence of marriage, the duty normally comes to an end when the marriage is dissolved through the divorce of the other spouse. I know this sounds like contradictory, but to the statement that I was saying, but when the divorce order is being when the decree of divorce is being granted, that is when the court will the application for the maintenance has to go together with the divorce. So usually, like I said, we'll talk about this when we're talking about the consequences of divorce. Usually, the court will say the application has to come when you are filing for divorce, and then when the court makes the decision, they will make that decision based on that particular application, and there are certain factors that they look at to say they look at your affordability, they look at the type of lifestyle that you live, they look at your age, they look at certain factors like if you are, let's say you've been married for 30 years, and then you are trying to now say, okay, this person now has been your housewife for a certain number of years, and you can no longer support them. Obviously, it's not going to work in court because they will look at, like, mostly it is usually I'm trying to look for a perfect example. Women are usually at the point of disadvantage because they're the ones who give up their careers, they tend to do the housework and look after children. So sometimes, even if they still continue to work, they are no longer earning whatever that they could have been earning if they didn't have children, if they didn't have spent so much time at home. Some even take the positions that are not demanding. So those are the factors that the courts will consider. And also the fact, one more example before we move on, also the fact that when a person who has been married for 5 years compared to a person who has been married for 20 years, obviously they're not going to be on the same scale. Even if the court will give an order for maintenance and so on and so on, it's not going to be the same. And there's also different kinds of maintenance that that the courts give or grant to spouses. Just briefly, there is a rehabilitative maintenance, which is usually given to younger spouses who still have the potential to work. Like the example that I gave, the example for somebody who has been married for maybe for 5 years, and maybe let's say the wife is maybe 30 years old. So she will be given a rehabilitative maintenance. That maintenance is not a permanent maintenance. They're not going to be getting it for the rest of their lives or until they get married. It's a maintenance that will be given to them until they are able to find a job, or until they are able to, let's say they're trying to get a degree or something so that they can be able to work. So until that time comes, and then that maintenance will stop. And then the second one, I don't know how I got into maintenance. The second one would be then there is another one called a token maintenance. So a token maintenance is the one that the court, at the time of the divorce, the court sees no need to grant maintenance at that time. So instead of the court denying the maintenance at that time, then they will grant a minimal amount of maintenance. Let's say, for example, they usually do ridiculous things and be like, okay, we're going to grant you a maintenance of 10 rand a month, right? So the court gives the applicant that 10 rand for a specific period of time. So when they don't want to deny the maintenance because they see that, okay, this person does not need maintenance right now, but they will need maintenance in the future. So if the court declines the maintenance that time, then the court cannot put that maintenance back at a later stage. So it has to be running. So, but they can be able to increase it. So at a later stage, when they see that, okay, now there is a need for this person to get the maintenance, and then they can now increase it to a particular amount that that person wants at that particular time. And then the other one, the last one, will now be a permanent maintenance. So a permanent maintenance is the one that is usually given to people over the age of, I think it's 45 and above or 50 and above, normally. So that is for people that usually are not able to work or to be able to secure employment because of their age and their dedication to the to this institution of marriage. So it's usually given to older people. So let us move on from maintenance. Do you have questions, sir?
Yes, I just want to understand something, especially on the permanent maintenance.
Yes.
So is the permanent maintenance goes on a month to month, or it's a once off?
Okay, so with maintenance, it's maintenance is not they don't give out a lump sum for maintenance, because remember the purpose of the maintenance is to be able to support that particular person, and that person doesn't have any other income. So it can be a lump sum, yes, maybe from those rich people, that millionaires and something like that, where they'll say that, okay, this person will actually do well with this money. But normally, average South Africans, it's usually a month-to-month basis. And that maintenance, it's from the permanent maintenance now. It's from the time that it was granted up until the person that is receiving the maintenance, up until they die, or at the time that they get married to somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is the permanent maintenance. So they will receive it from the time that it is ordered until the time that they die, or until the time that they get remarried. So usually they say that there has been cases where somebody who has been given a permanent maintenance, obviously this person has been married for quite a number of years. Maybe they don't want to get married anymore. But then the cases that have come up previously was the cases of where that particular person now goes on and falls in love with somebody else, and then they live together with that person. But remember what the court says. The court says until you remarry. So the fact that you are living together with somebody else, it doesn't mean that you are married. So there have been such cases where people are saying, okay, fine, it's supposed to be until they remarry or something like that, but this person now lives with somebody else. They're obviously using my money to support their household, etc., etc. But usually the court will deal with that on merit basis, but doesn't usually fly in the courts. So I see that we have, if there is no other questions, I see that we have 8 minutes. Actually, when I asked on the group, somebody said to me they wanted to deal with the assignment questions. I don't know if anybody has the assignment questions that you want us to deal with before we go on a short break. Are you good? Mr. Nkuna, are you good? You don't have any questions with regards to the assignment?
It's only that I was not ready with that one. Maybe when we go to the break, one can check 1 or 2 questions in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so if you do come up with any questions, Dike Lady, Clifford, Sana, if you do come up with any questions, please type them on the chat box, or you can just talk to me. We can stop and discuss those questions. So let's take a short break because this thing will cut off 40 minutes. So we'll take a short break and we'll be back shortly. Let's say like 2 minutes, and then I'll come back immediately. So we will use the same link, the one that I posted on the group. I will see you guys just now. Thank you.
Thank you, T.